Hey, Evie.
Hi Eric, how are you?
Good, good, good. How are you?
I'm doing good. How's
Thank.
everything there?
We're still in lockdown, so I'm sorry for the cap.
Oh, you're still in lockdown.
Yes, we're still in lockdown.
Really? Uh,
Yeah.
where are you located now?
Taiwan. I'm in Taiwan.
Oh, yeah, this COVID is it's a bummer.
Crazy.
It's ups and downs, I think, everywhere in the
Yeah. So, Evie, can you introduce yourself for these coaches in Taiwan?
Yes. So my name is Ivi. So I'm originally from Brazil. I went to America in 2000, what is it now? 2010. And then stay there for about 11 years. Did my bachelor's, my master's. I played soccer there, and then started doing sports performance in 2014, 2015. And now I'm in England, in Brighton. I moved here last year, so it's been quite a different setting than America. Very rainy. It's raining a lot. It is summer. It's supposed to be summer now. So still getting used to it, but yeah, just loving it so far.
Good, good. So, you still work with soccer team, right?
Yes, yes,
So, can you talk a little about the movement in soccer, like acceleration, deceleration, and the multi-directional movement? Is it like really like crossover and shuffle?
yes. So I think when you talk about soccer, there's a lot that a lot of movement involved, and I think um, a lot of places and there's a lot of workshops and courses that mainly talk about the speed, like acceleration, linear. But I think there's a lack of understanding and a little bit of dive into more of the deceleration, but also the deceleration and change in direction, because a lot of the times when you if you need to change direction, you need to decelerate, and a lot of times that you decelerate, you're changing direction in soccer. So so I think it's very important to have a holistic way to look at the movement skills part, and find ways within your training, within a warm-up or your training per se, to hit those areas. But I think it's very important to talk about is there has to be a link between what you do as a strength conditioning performance coach and what's happening within your team. And what I mean by that is, what is your training schedule look like? What is done by the coaches during that training? Is there a lot of small-sided games played? If there's not a lot of small-sided games played, so how are they actually being able to not only do that movement in isolation, but also have the capacity to do that movement? So when you think about change of direction and then deceleration, you can be as good as you want in doing isolated drills and teaching them how to control the deceleration and change that direction, work on strength and power. But if they're not doing that daily in their training, then there has to be something that we have to look at into that holistic way with our coaching staff, with the coaching staff that you as a coach work to be able to fill in that gap. So I think definitely there's has to be more change direction, teaching players how to shuffle the right way and how to cross over the right way. And a lot of the things is the feeling of it. It's being able to have drills with the players that they can feel the positions. Where do I have to move? What direction of force? What vector am I doing? So that all have, I think it has to be part of a bigger plan, a more holistic way to see things.
Can you talk about how to train like deceleration?
Yes. So deceleration, I like to do a lot of kind of mix the isolation drills with something more sport specific, because at the end of the day, if you do too much drills in isolation, your player is not going to understand probably why they're doing that. So when I try to do a deceleration session, I normally start with the motor control part of it. So, okay, how am I going to teach them when to decelerate and hold that position? So a lot of the times we're going to use a bend over their waist, and I'm going to have somebody holding them in front of them to apply that force in front of them. And then I'm going to say, okay, when I say 1, you're going to take 1 step forward and then hold that position in a split squat position, for example. And I'm going to challenge them in that position. So if I'm holding that bend, as soon as they are in that split squat position, I'm going to test them out in around 360 with that bend, just to get them to feel that position and hold that position. And then from then on, then we're going to go from that to, I'm going to go 2 steps or 3 steps. So as soon as I say go, you're going to go 1, 2, 3 and hold. So now you're increasing the speed, you're increasing the complexity of the movement, still trying to figure that out for the player to figure that out. Then I remove the bend. And I start to get a little bit of chaos into the equation. So you can actually do your deceleration work with a little bit of change of direction with a reaction component. So I can have the players kind of starting. When I say go, you're gonna accelerate as fast as you can. And then you can, get a cue. You can use a cue and say, when I say even numbers, when I say odd numbers, I want you to decelerate to the right or decelerate to the left. And then I add another layer, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do even more specific to football, to soccer. So I have 2 people, one have a ball, the other one is waiting in front. That person passes the ball to the other person. As soon as she passes that ball, she accelerates to defend the 1v1. And now you're seeing that action that because it has the ball, players are going to be way more inclined to do it. And they're going to understand why you did that deceleration with the bungee, with the band in first place, to prepare them for those extremely high forces and extremely high eccentric forces, and be able to do and be on their feet to go, to the left, to the right, or anything like that. So that's the deceleration part that I would use in a warm-up, for example. Now, if you have 15 minutes, you can be creative on how you do that. And then if I'm trying to get a deceleration more specific to the training, then I'm going to talk to my technical staff, and I'm going to say how and where in the week can I try to build that capacity of deceleration. In a small-sided game is the best way to do it, and you can recreate drills that really target deceleration. So I'll give you an example of one. So you have a 5v5v5. So you have 3 groups, and you can build. That's something that we do a lot in the club that I currently work. And you can go 3 groups, and you can build almost like a small-sided game area, right? So the 3 groups, 2 are on the opposite ends, and then 1 of group of 5 is in the middle to defend for 60 to 90 seconds. As hard as they can, they're trying to defend that 5v5v5, and the other teams, they're trying to pass the ball and pass it to the other group. And you can limit you can tell them you can only pass to the other group if you have at least 5 passes. So now what you're doing is you're increasing for that, especially for the defending group, you're increasing the number of decels in a very high chaotic environment. That is the game, which is so important. So I could do isolated drills with conditioning as much as I could, but nothing beats doing that with the chaos of a sport-specific game. For player buy-in, for decision-making purpose, because now I'm trying to tell them. So the good thing with that one thing that you can add to that team in the middle. So if they get the ball, you can add some gates on the outside of that small sided grid, because now you're just not telling them to just get the ball and boot the ball out. You're telling them to get the ball under fatigue and make a decision, which is pass the ball through the gate with accuracy, which is what happens in the game. And I think there's a lot of work to be done across the sport that increases not only the movement efficiency, but the capacity to do that movement in fatigue and be able to still be able to do that decision-making process.
So I saw a lot of like acceleration, then decelerate, then acceleration, like re-acceleration. So how do you train that? The deceleration, then re-accelerate. How do you train that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that can do that. If you want to be a little isolated, if you want to kind of add in your warm-up, something like that, you can do, a bunch of poles. You can put a pole here, a second pole, and a third pole. And they have to accelerate. And in the middle, the second pole, they have to go decelerate to a back pedal to a re-acceleration. So a lot of the times I use the grid, the drill that I use the most was when you put a mannequin in the middle. So that player, they have to accelerate through that mannequin, touch that mannequin to get a little bit of that feeling of real game situation. And then you can use reaction and say, okay, when you're approaching that mannequin, I'm going to say left or right. So you have to backpedal to the left. There's a cone in the back of you, and you have to backpedal, decelerate, and then re-accelerate as hard as you can. And the best way to increase the intensity of action is to get a competition. So you can do relay races. So you have 3 groups, and they have to do it. And you have to be very careful because players like to cheat because they're competitive. So you have to find ways that it doesn't allow them to cheat that much. So a lot of the times you have to be very clear on the rules so they know what they're doing. So you're able, I don't know how many times I did so many drills that were so good in paper, but then when I coached them, it was so bad because the players were like, Ivi, but there's a easy way to cheat. So this team's going to cheat. So then, probably a lot of coaches know that feeling when it's so good on paper, but then you do it and it's crap.
Yeah.
So I think that's the fun of designing drills. And I think that's how we as coaches learn the most is trial and error and being humble enough to, a lot of the times it's not going to work out the right way that we want.
Yeah. So for deceleration, you mentioned about eccentric. How do you work eccentric? Like, do you work tempo or like rapid eccentric, or you just build up?
Yeah, so I think that it's part of that holistic way to do things. I think you have in terms of your gym programs and even stuff that you do on the pitch, on the field, you have to be able to kind of go through that force velocity curve, right? And be able to always make sure you do that, all different kinds of, there's some times that you're gonna have to lift heavy things, and sometimes you're gonna have to lift heavy things explosive, and that feeling, I think the landing mechanics part, I think is important to be able to know how to absorb forces. And a lot of the times is the capacity, I think, in terms of muscle, tendons, joints, but also the motor control, because a lot of kids, especially when you coach young athletes, they're going to lack that muscle control and neuromuscular coordination to do those things. And that's for injury prevention too. I think that's for injury prevention kind of way to do things. So definitely, I think when you're preparing for eccentrics, for deceleration, you need to hit all those targets in the force velocity curve. And how you do that, it really depends on, are you in season? Are you off season? There are ways to do everything. If you do like a more conscious method in the gym, where you go very strong for a low volume set of reps, and then you want them to do like a broad jump and then go as fast as they can. And drills too, and on the pitch, that you can increase the intensity where they have to get the eccentric from a very high velocity drill, but also I'm going to slow them down sometimes and then say, okay, I wanted to hold that position and just feel that position. So it has to be a mix of things. You have to expose your athlete to all different kinds of vectors, angles, forces, velocities. And the way you do that, you have to be able to look out, zoom out. And I think a lot of us coaches, and I committed that mistake a lot of times, we think that our work is in isolation. And it's not. And it has to be part of an entire group of things where you're communicating with your technical staff to, when are you doing that? Because if I'm doing a high control, change of direction, deceleration session or warm up on a day that my team is actually going to play 10v10, 11v11, I'm not really preparing them for what they need to be warmed and need to be kind of primed to. I'd rather going to do something more long hamstring, more posterior chain involvement. So there has to be a link between what you do within your warm-ups, within your gym programs, to what your players need. And it has to be a reflection from us as coaches to know the environment that we work for and just observe what is it that my team is lacking in training. Oh, my team is not doing enough high-speed running. Okay, so I might have to supplement that a lot within my speed work. Or my team might be lacking change of direction. Okay, so I'm going to find ways to get my technical staff to include more change of direction, more small-sided game, or I'm going to implement within my warm-up. There's always a way.
Okay, I'm gonna jump into the next question. So, can you tell me like how you program like your condition, how you program for your team for the condition off season and in season? Like, do you use like mass for the testing?
Yeah, so I think it's very important to test, because you need to know where your players are at. I always tell coaches that, when you look at the famous box-to-box run that every football team that normally do at the end of the game, there's a big difference when you do. So let's talk about us two. So you, Eric, are very fit. So you can run for days. You're very explosive, very powerful. I'm not very fit right now. I'm struggling a little bit. So if a coach tells you to do a box-to-box run, which is about, 65 meters, 70 meters, and you need to get there in 15 seconds. So it's a 15 seconds on, 15 seconds off, right? For you, it's going to be super easy because you're very fit and you're a fast player, and I'm struggling a little bit. So my 15 seconds is going to be very hard. So if I'm doing conditioning and my purpose is to actually work on the capacity on that high intensity interval training, you're not going to get better probably, because that 15 seconds is so easy for you, right?
Yeah.
So testing is very important because you need to know the individual players and what their capacity is. So I think, and there's a lot of different ways to test that. There's a lot of things in the literature, a lot of different ways to skin the cat. And I think I personally like a lot the 30-15 test by Martin Boucher, because I think that it's intermittent. It has a way to, it's an easy way to prescribe individual running prescription. And it correlates with VO2 max too, based on the literature. So I like that. I used that in the past. There's a lot of different ways you can do a mass run as a 1K trial. You can do the Bronco repeats. I don't know if you heard about the Bronco repeats. It's just brutal, which is 0:20, 0:40, 0:60. You do that 5 times and you collect the time trial. You can use that. So no wrong way here. I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. But if you stick to a test, then just stick to it. Just choose one and stick to it and be consistent with it. But in season, well, let's talk about off season, because I think off season is very important. It's a very important part of the season for you to get prepared. And I think your success in the performance aspect in terms of injuries and all that in preseason, I think it has a lot to do with off-season work. So off-season work, I think, is the time to get the work that normally you don't have the time to do it in season, and things that you can get better at. For me personally, I would take advantage of, and again, it depends on the amount of months that you have off-season. You know, in America, our off season was about 3 to 4 months. It's a long off season, so you can do a lot of foundational base work. And time to do it. But here is different. Here it's like 5 weeks. So what do you kind of try to do that in those 5 weeks? And I think a lot of the times you can do aerobic capacity work, but I think high speed running exposure is the biggest one. You have the time to progressively build that high-speed running exposure, get change of direction exposure. You have to have change of direction capacity. And I like to do, in off-season, I like to do more running-based, because that's where you're really going to get the repetitions, because players are not going to have, potentially not going to be with teams. So you have to be creative with how much you do it. So change the direction, and then use that time to really perfect the basics of all those different things, the acceleration work, the speed and power work, that sometimes you don't have that freedom to do it in season. So that off-season plan, I mean, there's different ways to do it. But personally, I would say high-speed running exposure, be able to push the limits. And I'm going to be very honest. When I started, I was a very conservative coach. So like when I was at Orlando Pride, like I remember I was so conservative in the beginning. I was always thinking that players were made of glass. But then I'm like, no, like I have to push them, and I have to push. And as long as it's progressive, has a plan in mind, it's science-based and evidence-based, I'll be fine. And then after I spent some time, my second season in Orlando Pride, I was really pushing them. I had a mentor, Shane Malone, who is a brilliant coach. I don't know if you know about him, but he's done a lot of papers on speed and high speed running exposure. And he's one of my biggest mentors. And he helped me out so much, and kind of giving me the tools to say, like, Ivi, let's push the limits. Let's push the limits. It has to be in a way that is progressive, but let's push the limits. And once that happened, it was very cool to see not only players getting more confident, and players knowing that their ceiling was probably higher than they thought it would be. So that off season is a very perfect way to do it, because you're in a controlled environment. You don't have to worry about them getting too much of injuries, because the probability of getting very big injuries in a controlled running environment is very hard, you know. So I think as long as you have a plan in place and you hit the boxes, I think that's the biggest thing. Once you hit in season, then now it's a matter of constant communication with technical staff, and then you fill in the gap. So a lot of the times you're going to have to fill in the gap sometimes on a week. You know, the plan is this, but nothing on this plan of the technical staff worked, in terms of like, they actually had to change because based on an opponent or based on the the weather or whatever it is. So how you as a coach can have a toolbox of things ready to go if something happens to complement that work that might not have done. So maybe they didn't get a lot of high-speed running and they haven't been having a lot of high-speed running within the drills. So I'm going to talk to the technical staff and say, can we get more drills that they can be more exposed to this? And then together, it has to be a collaboration thing and it has to be designed together. And then you can complement, especially for players that don't play a lot of minutes, then you can complement on days after a game or the day after a game or right after the game on the prescription of work that you can do to hit those things that they didn't hit in the game.
So for your game schedule, how many games is in like for a week? Is it like one game a week or is like depends?
Yeah, it depends. I think both leagues that I play, I coached, and it really depends because a lot of the times we would have one game a week, but a lot of the times we're gonna have 2 games a week. It really depends, but most of the time I would say one game a week, which makes your life a little bit easier. I think the men's team schedules in the Premier League is just absolutely brutal. Your in-season training is more of like making sure the players are fresh and ready to go, and a lot of the times that's what you do in season. You have to be able to make sure players are fresh. So your high intensity work, the sessions that you can really push them, it has to be not too early in the week because that's too much to close after a game, but it has to be very carefully done, again, in conjunction with the technical staff. So you're not overcooking players, but also not undercooking them either. So it has to be a balance, and I think it's the exciting part of coaching is kind of how to balance those things.
So like if it's like in season, and how do you like, let's pretend it's like the game is only on like Saturday. So how would you gonna program the in-season training?
Mm-hmm. I'll probably ask technical staff first because we have to work around them, and I think that's important for coaches to understand because we can't be dictating everything on the staff. So I think I would say on a Sunday because I'm more used to that. So if you're on a Sunday, then you can either have a Monday active recovery day, and there's a lot of different. I think it really depends on your team and your environment and all that. When do you want that day off? Do you want that day off right the day after the game, or you want 2 days after a game? When I was a soccer player, I remember I liked having a day off after the game because I just needed to switch off. But a lot of the times, players are not going to sleep well after that game. So that day off, it's not going to work out very well because then, that's the only day that I can actually sleep in, but then I actually don't sleep very well. So I think listening to your players are very important to know when to kind of do that day off. Then from that players that didn't play, then you can assign a top up. And then the players that played can do a recovery session. So match day plus 2, I think 2 days after a match it's the most critical part where you don't want to do anything explosive, anything high speed running related, change direction. You can do some very light technical or have your day off on a match day plus 2. And then you have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So the Wednesday and Thursday are probably the most safe to do more of a high intensity session. I think, based on my personal opinion, I think Wednesday should be your high intensity day in terms of small sided stuff. That's where your small sided games can come into play. A very high intensity work to rest ratio. And then your Thursday, you can still do decent work on Thursday, but you can do a more high-speed running exposure day. So you can do a 10v10, 9v9, whatever it is. Now that it's kind of getting close to a game, but not really, you still have to make sure the work to rest ratios work appropriately. You still have to make sure you're not doing too much of one thing. There's quite a good balance between that high-speed running, and not every drill is going to be high-speed running. And then Friday, that's when you start kind of tapering down. Friday is your moderate day to more moderate light day, where you don't want to get them too sore, because 2 days after that, they're going to have a game. So I think medium-sized stuff, limit high-speed running a little bit. Don't do too much high-intensity, small-sided games, because that's a lot of load, neuromuscular load and fatigue. And then Saturday is a short session. And I think Friday, you want to try to limit the time a little bit. And then Saturday is like, I would say 60-minute session from start to finish. Very quick, very explosive, nothing too crazy. Low volume if you're doing work to rest ratios, low volume of stuff. And I think that would be kind of an ideal week. But again, ideal sometimes doesn't work. It's professional.
Yeah.
So you just have to be flexible and just kind of pick the battles and work that way.
Good. So if it's like in season, do you do like really heavy strength training?
Yes, yeah, I think it's definitely important that you use your in season to continue to work on your strength. I think that there is a long time where we were like very protective as coaches and say, we just have to do a maintenance program. And I don't think you have to do a maintenance program. I think you can continue to work on your strength. You just have to lower the volume. You just have to understand where you want to put that strength program and lower that volume. And so a lot of the times we're going to do the main lifts, 4 sets of 4, 5 sets of 3, just something to get the stimulus. But again, you always have to know what did they do in that session. And that's the biggest thing, because a lot of the times, if you go 2 sessions a week, normally you can do a strength session and a power session. That power session, if you do a power session after training, a lot of times they're going to be too fatigued. So you're not going to get really the power session that you want. So maybe a power session before training, it will be a little bit better. But again, logistics of professional sports, sometimes you can't do that. So you have to be very kind of strategic and pick your battles in it. But once you know what you want to do, you just have to juggle where you want to put that in. Even if my power session is going to be on the pitch, because on my warm-up, because I know that if I do a power session after training, they're not going to get the stimulus because they're just too fatigued. But the strength part, early in the week, it's very important to do early in the week. And and maintain low volume. But I think it's very important to keep that and hit those marks that the check marks that you want. You want to do a lower body push, lower body pull. You want to do an anti-rotation. You want to do a lumbar pelvic control exercise, posterior chain, all that stuff. But also understand what that lift is gonna give them in terms of soreness. You just have to be very, very kind of careful on how much you do it and how you do it. A lot of the times you need to be flexible too, because players are going to be too tired to do one exercise, and it's like, okay, let's do an alternative one, and it's fine. The world's not going to end. So I think it's just very important to get to that point where we as coaches can be flexible, because the dynamics of professional sports, it's always changing. It's always constantly, there's challenges every week that you have to deal with. But as long as you communicate well with your players, you listen to them, and then you have a very good collaboration between coaches and technical staff.
Okay. Can you talk a little about like how you monitor the fatigue?
Yes, there's a lot of different ways. I think, you know, there's
Okay.
there's force. A lot of people use force plates. But again, not a lot of teams will have access to force plates, so you have to kind of, even counter movement jumps. I think sometimes you just have to be able to know what metric you're looking at, because a lot of the metrics are not going to be that sensitive to that fatigue that you're trying to see. For me, to be honest, there's nothing better than just talking to your players and kind of, I think that talking to your players, checking their sleep after very high intensity sessions, if their sleep is crap, then you're going to know that after high intensity session, they didn't sleep well, they're not going to recover well, that's going to be fatigue. So be able to have those informal conversations every day and understand that there's way more than technology to assess fatigue. And I think that we sometimes get too caught up on the technology aspect of it. Something that like I think that I would love to have is get a Google form, quick 1, 2, 3 questions after games, where you ask players for that particular game, how much were they prepared for that game physically? Were they fatigued? Were they not fatigued? Because then, as a reflection to my own coaching, I'm going to look back to my week and I'm going to say, okay, what did I do that might have caused them to have the fatigue effect for that specific game? Something in the gym, something in the technical staff drills that maybe we didn't control that much. So I think it's very, very important to have debrief after every game and talk to your players. And one thing that I always tell coaches, you have to be able to have your coaching diary, coaching journal log. I use a Word document in my Google Docs. So I have my diaries from training since 2014. Ooh. I can go back to when I was in college and then see exactly my train of thought, everything that I was doing. Players coming to me and saying, oh, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. I go and put it in my Google Doc, in a calendar kind of doc, because then now I document everything. When I look at my GPS data or any type of objective data, and then I look at data and date that something was weird, I'm probably not going to remember what happened 2 weeks ago or a year ago, right? So I think having that coaching journal log, it's very important for you to know, okay, this is what happened. This is exactly the drills that we did. This is exactly the time, the work to rest ratios. This is the feedback that player X told me after the session. Oh, the session was very hard. Oh, I'm very fatigued. I literally write everything. And then now I zoom out, and now I know a little bit more about my players. I know a little bit more about the systems in place, and I can affect that better the following week, which is very important. So I think, yes, informal conversations for me still is the best fatigue monitoring there is. Yes.
Sorry, I didn't follow the script.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay. So, final question, and I'm gonna let you go. Okay? Can you tell everybody about the website and the mentorship and the mentorship and
workshops?
Yeah, workshop. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I had a mentorship program, and I'm restructuring that mentorship program. Before I had a one-on-one mentorship program, and now I'm restructuring it because it was very hard for me to juggle full-time work with online business stuff. So I had to be a little bit more creative. I do have a coach empowerment network, which is a free session for coaches, male, female, where I bring every month I bring a female coach to talk about their story. So we had a lot of amazing coaches coming in. And it's a great opportunity to network. And I think networking in our industry is so important. So I have that, and I had a little pause for the summer because of other projects that I'm doing. But slowly but surely I'm going to get those programs out. I'm about to release in the next month or so. There's going to be athletic programs for athletes, for general population programs. And then also very hopefully it's going to come soon, a coaching course where a lot of the coaching course is going to be based on my experiences as a coach with science-based evidence and evidence-based stuff, where it's going to be all about things that we don't learn in school, we don't learn in courses, we don't learn in workshops. It's about the communication. It's about the challenges of dealing with professional sports or being elite level, which is very needed. Mental health, all that stuff that I think not a lot of people talk about. So hopefully that will be in the next program. I have a coaching website, casagrande.com, where that's where I'm going to start putting more stuff there. And yeah, just be on the lookout through Instagram about those upcoming programs.
Okay. When the program come out, tag me and I'll share it for you, okay?
Oh, lovely. Thanks, Eric. When you decide, when COVID allows and you can come to England, let me know and we can get you to watch a game here.
Thanks. Good luck for the season.
Thank you so much for your invitation.
Thank you. Maybe after the season finish, we can do this again, okay?
Please do. I'll be more than willing to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye. So that's all for today. See you.